Alright, so this is a Mandela effect video, and it's gonna piss off most of, if not the entire Mormon church, but anyways, I'm a Mormon myself, technically, even though I'm an inactive member because I've went off and diverged into polytheism instead of monotheism, but that's besides the point. I'm not excommunicated at the moment in time, so I'm technically a member of the church. So yeah, whatever. If it gets me excommunicated, it gets me excommunicated. But anyways, this is definitely going to piss off any Mormon that hears this, but that's besides the point. I'm going to say it anyways. Alright. So this Mandela effect was made apparent to me recently when I took a trip to Utah to visit some family and to help them out because my grandma and grandpa went into the nursing home. So I had to go and clean out their house, the stuff that my family couldn't do because I'm able to do stuff that normal people aren't able to do. Yeah. So anyways, that's besides the point of me cleaning it. So I was flying in, and I come in, and we're going really low over the Salt Lake, and I'm like, why are we going so low over Salt Lake? And then we landed right next to Salt Lake because the airport was right there. So I thought, wow, that's a little bit strange because every time I've flown in to Salt Lake City, we've flown really high over the lake, and we went halfway into the city to actually land in the Salt Lake City airport. This is in Utah, Salt Lake City. I don't know if I mentioned Utah, but anyways. So I thought that was a little bit strange. So I'm waiting for my ride. My ride's my cousin. I'm not going to say names, but she's my cousin. Anyway, so she was coming to pick me up. So I pulled up Google Maps to look at it because I thought that was really strange that Salt Lake was right there, and I remember thinking, wow, so this Great Salt Lake is no longer great because it's small for some odd reason. I thought that was really strange because there was a lot of flooding. I could see the flooding because they had been getting a lot of rain there in Utah, which is unusual, so there was flooding all over the place, and I was expecting the Great Salt Lake to be extra great, but then it was just more like the Good Salt Lake because it was super small. Instead of the Great Salt Lake. But anyway, so I looked at the Google Maps and pulled it up on my phone, and I noticed right off the bat that Salt Lake had changed positions. No longer was it below halfway in between half of the state and the bottommost part of the state. It was like halfway in between, so it would have been here halfway in between. If my pointer finger on my left hand was the middle of the state and my thumb was the bottom of the state, it would have been right here directly in the center, and that was where the Great Salt Lake was, and then a little bit up above that was Salt Lake City. Well, anyway, so Salt Lake City was also halfway in between. So I thought, wow, this is really weird because Vernal, which is in the northern part of the state, was directly east of Salt Lake City, my location that I was in. And I was like, alright. Instantly I thought, Mandela effect. Salt Lake City has completely changed position, and Great Salt Lake has over halved its size. Yeah, and then later on, when I was traveling from Salt Lake City to Vernal on the bus, we drove through Park City. Well, now, Park City used to be north and east of Salt Lake City, and when you were going from Salt Lake City to Vernal, you went due north. So you weren't going through Park City to get to Vernal, but we drove directly through Park City to get to Vernal because it had changed positions. Now it was directly due east in between Salt Lake City and Vernal. So yeah, that was completely different. You never drove through that before. And then what used to take you 8 to 9 hours to drive from Salt Lake City to North Dakota probably would have taken you only, I don't know, like 4.5, 5 hours now. So the time had changed completely too. If you go back and you watch the movie SLC Punk, yes, SLC Punk, I know, but it's called Salt Lake City Punk, that's why they call it SLC Punk. They even talk about the time it takes to drive from Salt Lake to North Dakota and Salt Lake to Arizona, and they said Salt Lake drive to Arizona only took you 4 hours, and the drive from Salt Lake City to North Dakota took you 8 hours, which is exactly what it used to be, but then the Mandela effect changed it, and now it takes you 4 hours to drive from, approximately 4 hours to drive from Salt Lake City to North Dakota, and then it would take you 8 hours to drive, approximately 8 hours to drive from Salt Lake City to Arizona, because it had completely changed, so it reversed. And if you don't believe me, you can go back and watch SLC Punk. They talk about having to travel out of state to get booze because of the lower alcohol percentage in Utah. So they would go to Arizona to get their booze because it would take longer to go to North Dakota, I think is what it is. I'm pretty sure that's North Dakota. It might be South Dakota. I'm not quite sure, but whatever. The state right above Utah. There you go. So, yeah. It might be Wyoming. I don't know. I'm confused a little bit. I'll have to look at a map. I can't pull up a map right now because my internet's out. But anyways, I'll comment down in the section below exactly what state it is right above. I think it's Wyoming, but it might be South Dakota. I'm not quite sure. Well, anyways, so they were talking about how it would take longer to go to the state above Utah from Salt Lake City than it would to go to Arizona. So they go to Arizona in the movie to pick up their booze because it took less time. But now, because of the Mandela effect, it would take more time to go to Arizona from Salt Lake City than it would to the state right above Utah, which I think is Wyoming, but I'm not quite sure. It might be South Dakota. But anyways, you can look at a map and figure it out yourself. But yeah. Anyways, so yeah, that's my Mandela effect. Salt Lake City has completely changed position, and so has Park City, Utah, and I'm sure it's going to piss off a whole bunch of Mormons because that's like the Mecca of Mormons is right there in Utah. So yeah, and the Great Salt Lake, it's so sad because it was really great and it was like really cool looking and everything. It was like the best lake I've ever been to. It was just super cool and everything. You could go into it and float, and there's no way you could drown, and people would drive cars into it and on accident sometimes, or like drive stolen cars into it to get rid of them, to dispose of them, that didn't know that the cars would float, and you would just see the cars floating out in the middle of the lake. It was hilarious. But anyway, so this is cool because you couldn't drown in it or anything because of the salt content of it. It was just really cool, and I remember it was just like vast. You couldn't even see the edge of it if you were standing there. But now you can stand there and see the edge of it. It's just sad that the Great Salt Lake is no longer great. It's super small now. But anyway, so yeah, there's my Mandela effect for this installment. See you.